There's a reason people underestimate you. Why they interrupt you, test your patience, or cross your boundaries like they own the right to. It's not because you're weak. It's because you're harmless. You reveal too much. You explain too fast. You care too openly. You try to be liked before you're respected. But in a Machiavellian world, being liked without being feared is the same as being invisible. Because the truth is, the world doesn't fear goodness. It fears mystery. From the moment you were born, you were trained to be good. Smile more. Be polite. Be approachable. Be kind first. But what did that bring you? People who talk over you, drain your energy, and only value you when they need something. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He warned that a ruler who is not feared will always be vulnerable. That doesn't mean violence. It means unreadability. Because in a world of noise, the one who stays silent becomes the center of attention. Not because people like him, but because they're not sure what he's thinking. They watch him not for entertainment, but for survival. That's the goal. To be watched, not for approval, but out of caution. When you're not seen as a threat, you're seen as a tool. Look at your own life. How many times were you ignored until you stopped explaining yourself? How many times did people only start respecting your boundaries after you enforced them with silence and distance? That's because most people play the goodness game, while others play the power game. They know you'll explain yourself. You'll forgive. You'll stay. You'll apologize first. You'll never escalate. And once someone knows you'll never escalate, they start doing it first because they know you'll take it. Machiavelli saw this everywhere in politics, in families, in friendships. People don't test the dangerous ones. They test the kind ones. Because they know your empathy will stop you before your pride does. But once you become a quiet threat, everything shifts. People flinch before they speak. They check their tone. They prepare their excuses in advance. Why? Because now even your silence feels like a warning. See? They expect you to react. That's how they measure control. Can they make you flinch? Can they make you explain? Can they make you chase? Every time you do, they mark you safe. Every time you don't, they mark you dangerous. And dangerous doesn't mean unstable. It means unreadable. Machiavelli understood something terrifying. Once people can predict your emotions, they start managing you. But if they can't predict you, they have to respect you. You've spent your whole life trying to be loved first. Now try being feared quietly, not with anger or volume, but with silence, calmness, and the refusal to bleed on command. Because the man who walks in smiling is forgettable. The man who walks in without a need to speak becomes a presence. And presence lasts longer than voice. Machiavelli never needed a sword. He won with perception. Because in this world, it's not about what you are. It's about what they think you're capable of. You don't have to be dangerous. You just have to be perceived as dangerous. And you can do that without a word. Control your visibility. Control your energy. Control your silence. Because one rule always holds true. People fear what they don't understand, and they respect what they fear. So let's begin with the first law of silent power. Law 1. Never show your entire hand. The loud ones show everything: their goals, insecurities, and emotional triggers. They talk, prove, brag, and explain. And the more they show, the easier they are to predict and control. Machiavelli didn't teach exposure. He taught opacity. If they can read you, they can replace you. If they can't, they prepare for you. So say less. React slower. Let your intentions live inside fog, not to confuse, but to control interpretation. Because in a world obsessed with being seen, the one they can't define becomes the one they can't forget. Law 2. Never defend yourself. Nothing shatters the illusion of power faster than defensiveness. If someone insults you and you explain yourself, you confirm their power to wound. If they call you distant and you justify it, you show that you care. And every time you explain your behavior, you tell them one thing: I still need your approval. Machiavelli would have just stared blankly and said, noted. That's it. That's power hearing everything, but giving back nothing. Law 3. Be unpredictable on purpose. A threat doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be uncertain. People don't fear what they understand. They fear what contradicts itself. Machiavelli might praise someone today and replace them tomorrow. Smile during a meeting and vanish the next week. Offer kindness once, then cold silence the next time. Why? Because inconsistency breeds emotional instability, and instability leads to submission. You don't need to be cruel. You just need to be unpredictable enough that people don't want to risk testing you. This is what modern people call mystery. Machiavelli called it a necessary illusion. Law 4. Stay calm when others lose control. The greatest intimidation is self-control in the middle of chaos. When people gossip, stay silent. When they panic, stay still. When they shout, speak slower. Because when you don't react, you show one thing: you can't be moved. And if you can't be moved, you can't be controlled. That's when you stop being a participant and become a presence. Machiavelli would rather end a conflict with one sentence than deliver 100 defenses during it. Because when people can't predict your words, they start adjusting their behavior before you speak. That's not communication. That's command. And that's where we'll pick up next, when fear stops being something you feel and becomes something you quietly cause. When people hear the word fear, they think violence. When they hear dominance, they think control. But Machiavelli knew real power wasn't about either of those. It wasn't about force. It was about presence. The most feared people in any room aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who can sit in silence and still shift the entire atmosphere. Because true command isn't about what you do. It's about what others think you might do. He once said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Not because fear makes you cruel, but because fear makes people respect your silence. You don't need to strike. You only need them to believe you could. That belief alone is stronger than any argument you'll ever make. The unthreatening are easy to disrespect. They're invited to be ignored, because no one fears losing what feels too available. Here's the psychology behind it. When someone doesn't fear losing you, they take more than they give. They demand your time, talk over you, test your patience, and call it banter. Because your presence carries no weight. They've labeled you safe, predictable, kind, accommodating. But in Machiavelli's world, those aren't virtues. They're vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities beg to be tested. So what does a threat look like? Not aggression, not revenge. It's simple. A threat is what you don't say. It's the silence after disrespect, the calm after gossip, the cold withdrawal after someone crosses a line. It's your stillness that unsettles them. Because when you don't react, they start reacting to their own guilt. That's power. And fear, that's your leverage. You're not just a person anymore. You're a consequence. Once people experience your distance, your silence, your refusal to chase, they start to associate your absence with discomfort. When you stop replying, they reflect. When you say less, they overthink. When you don't show up, they finally notice. Your silence becomes a mirror that forces them to see what they did wrong. That's psychological warfare at its most elegant form. Machiavelli didn't need armies. He needed silence, distance, and uncertainty. Because when people can't read your next move, they either retreat or start trying to win your favor again. Either way, you win. So build the wolf, kill the dog. Everyone wants to be the wolf, but they forget the wolf doesn't bark. He doesn't announce. He watches, and when he moves, no one's ready. That's who you must become. You don't bark. You don't explain. You don't beg. You calculate. You withdraw. You let your silence speak for you. Because the unforgettable ones aren't remembered for what they said. They're remembered for what they didn't. Loud people are remembered in the moment. Still people are remembered in memory. Because after you leave, people replay what they couldn't define. Why didn't he say anything? Was he angry? Was he planning something? What did that silence mean? They can't move on. Because you never gave them closure. That's how presence becomes power. Not through noise, but through potential. You don't have to speak to dominate a room. Most power isn't spoken, it's signaled. It's in your posture, your eyes, your stillness, when everyone else scrambles to be seen. Machiavelli didn't shout orders. He watched. He let people reveal themselves, and then, quietly, he made them fear the space between his words. You want that kind of control? Then start with these habits. Habit 1. Never be the first to react. When someone offends you, mocks you, or baits you, pause. Everyone else rushes to respond. But not you. You blink. You breathe. You let the moment hang. Because every person who reacts first loses the frame. They reveal insecurity. But the one who waits becomes the one everyone watches. The pause isn't hesitation, it's calculation. And nothing frightens people more than being silently calculated. Habit 2. Speak slower. Say less. Leave earlier. It sounds simple, but it changes how people perceive you. Speaking slower signals confidence. Saying less increases your value. Leaving early creates mystery. Most people talk to be understood. But power doesn't seek understanding, it seeks interpretation. You want people to ask, what did he mean by that? Was she agreeing or warning me? Why did he leave so suddenly? That's how you live rent-free in their mind. Machiavelli never overstayed. He never gave people time to fully understand him, and that's why they remembered him. Because what people can't define, they fear. Habit 3. Withdraw to reinforce presence. The most powerful people aren't the ones who show up everywhere. They're the ones whose absence is felt. When you stop over-appearing, something strange happens. People notice when you're gone. They start asking, where is he? They start missing what they took for granted. The dog is always there. The wolf appears and vanishes. And when the wolf vanishes, the forest goes silent. That's scarcity, and scarcity creates value. Be the one they notice is gone, not the one they expect to stay. Habit 4. Stop over-explaining. If you said no, let it be no. If you changed your mind, let it stand. If you walked away, stay gone. You don't owe anyone a reason for your decisions, because the moment you start explaining, you start defending. And the one who defends has already lost power. A threat doesn't explain. It simply exists. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology did. The less you justify your actions, the more people assume you know something they don't. Habit 5. Stay emotionally neutral. You'll be tested constantly. People will joke about your silence to get a rise out of you. They'll flirt, guilt-trip, or provoke you just to see if they can still touch your emotions. Don't let them. Smile if you must. Observe always. Withdraw when needed. Because the more they try to read you, the more power you gain. Machiavelli didn't act powerful. He trained it through restraint, through ritual, through daily composure. His quiet message was simple. You'll never know what I'm capable of, but if you cross me, you might find out. That's not arrogance. That's control. There's a line between being mysterious and being forgotten, between silence that commands and silence that fades. Machiavelli mastered that line. He balanced fear with respect, because if people only fear you, they'll obey but secretly plot against you. And if they only respect you, they'll admire you but never guard their words around you. He understood that lasting power lives in the tension between both. That subtle feeling people get when they're around you. You're calm, but not to be tested. You're kind, but not accessible. You're silent, but not asleep. That's the tension that makes people self-correct before you even have to. And once you build that, they'll stop trying to manage you, because they won't know what version of you they'll get next. The most powerful people don't raise their voice. They raise the stakes. They don't command obedience through shouting or punishment. They do it through tension, that quiet, psychological pressure that makes others cautious around them. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He didn't crave fear for its own sake. He wanted reverence, that uneasy respect that keeps people alert even in his silence. Because here's the paradox. Fear without respect breeds rebellion. Respect without fear breeds entitlement. But fear and respect combined, that's influence. And influence is the highest form of power. So how do you build that balance? You control the tension in the room, not by speaking more, but by revealing less. Not by acting tough, but by making people wonder where your limits are. Machiavelli would say, be consistent in control, but inconsistent in emotion. You're always composed, but not always warm. Sometimes you're observant, sometimes unreadable, sometimes calm, sometimes subtly amused. Never angry, never predictable. That unpredictability keeps people slightly off balance. They don't know how you'll react, so they tread carefully. You don't need to be feared for your anger. You need to be respected for your composure. A calm man in chaos is far more intimidating than a loud one in control. When the room burns and you remain still, everyone senses it. You see things they don't. You're calculating while they're panicking, and the one who calculates is always the one who commands. Machiavelli would speak only when necessary, never to fill silence, only to shape it. Because the fewer words you use, the heavier they become. You can dissolve conflict with one sentence, correct someone with a single look, end a discussion with a pause and a nod. That's how presence replaces performance. When others are performing, you're positioning. When they talk to be liked, you talk to be remembered. And when they leave wondering what you were thinking, you've already won. Now here's where most people fail. They confuse peace with power. They think being calm means avoiding conflict. It doesn't. True calm doesn't avoid tension. It creates it. Because when you stay calm while others lose composure, you expose them. You make their chaos look childish. You make their aggression look desperate, and suddenly everyone in the room sees who's truly in control. That's why Machiavelli taught restraint as strategy. He believed composure wasn't weakness, it was camouflage. It allowed him to see more, hear more, and react last. And the one who reacts last controls the narrative. He would say, the moment you respond too quickly, you give them the rhythm. But when you stay still, they start dancing to your tempo. It's not domination. It's orchestration. You're not silencing people to crush them. You're teaching them how to speak in your presence. Now, to build this aura of tension and respect, there are a few modern rules Machiavelli would follow today. Rule 1. Give precision, then vanish. When you speak, be surgical. Deliver your idea clearly, then stop. Don't repeat yourself. Don't over-explain. Leave your words hanging like smoke in the air. Because when something ends abruptly, people replay it in their minds. They search for hidden meaning. They question their interpretation. And in that confusion, your influence deepens. Rule 2. Let praise exist without confirmation. When people compliment you, don't gush. Don't deflect. Don't feed their need for connection. Hold their gaze. Nod slightly. Maybe a faint smile. That's it. Because when you accept praise calmly, you communicate one thing. You already knew your worth. People are terrified of that kind of self-assurance. It tells them you're not waiting for approval, and nothing commands more respect than a person who doesn't need validation. Rule 3. Make your absence an experience. Most people fear disappearing because they think they'll be forgotten. But here's the truth. If your only value comes from being constantly visible, you were never truly valuable to begin with. Powerful people manage their exposure like currency. They withdraw so that when they do appear, it matters. Because what's rare is respected. Think about it. Why do we revere the moon more than the sun? Because it shows up when the world goes dark. Be like that. Show up when it counts. Then vanish before you become ordinary. Rule 4. Let others chase closure. This is one of the most brutal lessons of silent power. Never give people the satisfaction of neatly closing every interaction. End conversations slightly early. Leave texts unanswered a little longer. Walk away just before they finish their thought. Why? Because unfinished stories are unforgettable. People don't obsess over what they understand. They obsess over what feels incomplete. When you deny closure, you give them something to think about, and they will. You don't need to dominate every exchange. You just need to leave a psychological echo behind. Rule 5. Protect your inner world like a fortress. When people ask what drives you, don't tell them. When they ask what you're working on, be vague. When they ask how you feel, answer with calm ambiguity. You give them hints, never headlines. Because the moment someone fully understands your why, they start predicting your how. And once they can predict you, they can control you. A mysterious inner world forces others to keep their distance, not out of rejection, but out of respect. They realize they're dealing with someone who isn't desperate to be understood. That's rare, and rarity is magnetic. Machiavelli's genius wasn't about ruling through cruelty. It was about mastering perception. He knew that power built on noise collapses quickly, but power built on silence, that endures. Because silence gives you what words never can, the luxury of being interpreted, not explained. And once people begin interpreting you, they start creating myths around you. They start saying, he's dangerous, she's impossible to read. There's something different about them. Let them talk, let them wonder, because the more they speculate, the less they challenge. That's how fear and respect coexist. Not through violence, through perception, through the ability to walk into any room and shift the energy without a single word. That's not arrogance. That's Machiavellian art. And when you master it, you'll realize you never had to demand respect. You only had to become the kind of person people respect automatically. Power built on silence isn't about manipulation. It's about discipline. Machiavelli didn't obsess over control, he obsessed over timing. Because silence without timing is just absence. But silence with precision, that's command. He understood that the strongest men don't move often. They move strategically. Most people live in reaction. They hear an insult and fire back. They feel doubt and start defending themselves. They sense disrespect and start over-explaining. But every time you react first, you give away your frame. You reveal your insecurities. You show them where to press next time. The unreadable man does the opposite. He doesn't fight noise with noise. He studies it. He lets people reveal everything while he reveals nothing. That's how you become untouchable, by letting others expose themselves in your silence. Machiavelli would call this the art of controlled restraint. He'd say, never interrupt your enemy while they're revealing their weakness, because silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of control. So when someone tests you, don't rush to prove yourself, don't fill the silence, don't correct the rumor. Just blink. Watch. Wait. Because the person who can sit in that tension the longest owns it. Most people confuse talking with power. They think if they keep explaining, they'll finally be understood. But the powerful don't need to be understood. They need to be felt. They move slower, speak less, and every word hits like a verdict. When you say one line after a long silence, people don't just hear it, they study it. They repeat it later. They remember it because it came from stillness, not desperation. That's the energy of command. You don't force respect. You make people feel it by how little you give away. And here's the secret Machiavelli would whisper today. Power doesn't belong to those who speak the most. It belongs to those who can afford not to. Because silence is expensive. It means you're not desperate for attention, validation, or outcome. It means your value is already known, and your next move doesn't need announcement. That's the final layer of silent strategy, to master not just your voice, but your absence. Because when your silence has gravity, you've crossed the line from being heard to being feared. And once that happens, you never need to demand respect again. You become it. Machiavelli's final lesson on silent power is this. Presence that lingers after you're gone is the highest form of control. Anyone can dominate while they're in the room, but only the truly powerful make people change their behavior when they aren't. That's not fear of punishment. That's the fear of potential. Because the greatest power is not what you do. It's what people believe you might do. So let's turn silence into something living, something that follows you. Strategy 1. Don't give people what they expect. Most people reveal themselves within minutes. They talk too much, overshare, and perform. They show their entire character before anyone even asks. But you do the opposite. You smile less. You speak slower. You offer nothing more than what's necessary. You create contrast, and that contrast makes people recalibrate their tone, their energy, even their breathing. You didn't ask for control. You took it by existing differently. When you don't play their rhythm, they have to adjust to yours. That's the silent way of shifting dominance. Strategy 2. Let them project, then withdraw. People can't stand mystery, so they start filling the gaps in your silence with their own stories. They decide who you are, what you're thinking, and what your motives must be. Let them. Don't correct them, because the moment they start projecting, they start obsessing. They replay your expressions. They search for meaning behind your pauses. And in doing so, they give you free psychological rent in their mind. You don't have to advertise who you are. Their imagination will do it for you. And it's usually more powerful than the truth. Strategy 3. Leave them mid-sentence. Emotionally or literally. End conversations before they're finished. Leave interactions just before they feel complete. Don't give them closure, because closure kills curiosity. And curiosity is the seed of obsession. When you walk away just a little too soon, they keep the dialogue alive in their own head. They replay what you said. They wonder what you meant. They imagine the ending you never gave them. And the more they think of you, the less they can move on from you. Strategy 4. Guard your inner world like a kingdom. People will try to access you, to know your story, your pain, your purpose. It's not curiosity, it's control. Because the moment someone knows what drives you, they can manipulate it, they can guilt you, they can mirror your goals to use them against you. So keep your motives hidden. When asked what you want, answer with things like, "It depends," or "I'm still deciding." That sounds simple, but it builds an aura of depth. It tells people that your world is layered, not available for easy consumption. And layered people, they become legends. Machiavelli would say, when they can't define your why, they start fearing your how. Strategy 5. Let time become your weapon. Most people lose because they're impulsive. They can't handle waiting. They crave instant validation, immediate replies, fast reactions. But you wait. You let silence stretch until the other person breaks it first. Because whoever breaks silence first breaks position. Time makes your presence heavier. When you delay a reply, your words grow in value. When you disappear for a while, your reappearance hits like a storm. And when you wait before acting, everyone else starts guessing what you're preparing. That guessing is your power. This is how Machiavelli would rule today, not through armies or speeches, but through presence that shapes behavior, through stillness that commands attention, through absence that becomes unforgettable. You don't have to be feared because you're violent. You only have to be feared because you're unreadable. When people can't predict you, they stop trying to control you. When they can't reach you, they start respecting your distance. When they can't understand you, they start protecting your approval. That's the paradox of influence. You win by being slightly out of reach. So from now on, don't overshare. Don't rush to explain. Don't prove your goodness. Let people feel your restraint. Let them misinterpret your silence. Because every misunderstanding strengthens your mystique. When you finally speak, make every word deliberate. When you act, make every move final. And when you walk away, never look back. Because the quiet man who controls when, where, and if he shows emotion, controls every room he walks into. That's the Machiavellian way. Power without noise, fear without threat, respect without begging. You don't have to announce your transformation. The world will feel it. In your stillness, in your timing, in the silence that follows you. And in that silence, you will no longer be the one chasing recognition. You will be the one they recognize, even when you say nothing at all.